My name is Paul Cusack. I'm an engineer by education. I do research in just about every field that universities teach in. And one particular field that I'm fond of is medical research. I want to talk about schizophrenia and its causes today. It's caused by iron and caffeine. Schizophrenia is proposed to be caused by severe dehydration. The dehydration can be caused by cholera or excessive caffeine intake, such as the energy drinks. First, we consider cholera. In areas where cholera was prevalent, schizophrenia ensues in generations which follow. For example, here in St. John, where I live, in Canada, there was a cholera outbreak in 1834, which killed 50 people, and in 1854, which killed 1,100 people. That's out of a population of about 30,000 people at the time. 5,000 out of the 30,000 were infected with the cholera virus. Record from the local, they called it the lunatic asylum at the time, psychiatric hospital, in 1870, and the cholera deaths, which were recorded by surname in 1854, show a strong correlation between people who entered the asylum and by whose families' names were in the cholera deaths. So there's an indication that there might be a genetic link between cholera and a mental illness. Nowadays, St. John has double the national rate of schizophrenia. The national rate is 1%. St. John's rate is 2%. 2 people per 100 get schizophrenia in St. John. Now in Margaritas, which is an island off the east coast of Africa, they had 4 cholera outbreaks in the 19th century. And they have a rate of schizophrenia 3.5 times that of their neighbor Madagascar, also an island off the coast of Africa. So why St. John and Margaritas? It's likely because there's high iron in both in the water in both places, in the drinking water. In St. John, it was populated by the Irish mostly. They eat a lot of potatoes, which are high in iron. And in Margaritas, if you see a picture of the rivers, they're red, flowing with iron. This explains the difference in death counts, because in St. John between 1834 and 1854. Because the water in St. John in between those years became piped from a place called Lily Lake, which has iron in the water, and it was pumped through cast iron pipes. So there was a lot of iron in the water. The iron leads to, it's called hyperferritism. It leads to excess. Iron leads to a weakened immune system. Iron is a cofactor, and in calcium and vitamin D, which are necessary for a healthy immune system. And so iron seems to be a culprit for schizophrenia. I'm sorry, for cholera. Now in 1834 and 1854 outbreaks, cholera results in diarrhea and vomiting, or dehydration. Iron or hyperferritism is known to weaken the human immune system. It acts as a cofactor for the body's absorption of calcium and vitamin D, both necessary for a healthy immune system. Also in St. John is the Irish population. The population eats a lot of potatoes, which are high in iron. Now more recently, since 1989 to 1999, there's been a 28% increase in schizophrenia among young males, ages 20 to 29. And the energy drinks, which are high in caffeine, became available in 1987. The mammoth increase in schizophrenia began in 1989. Caffeine takes water to metabolize. Thus we see dehydration again. So dehydration caused by the cholera, dehydration caused by caffeine intake, caffeine metabolism. Now, patients with schizophrenia are known to have smaller pineal glands. It's a gland in the middle of the brain, in the back, and it produces melatonin. Melatonin is a sleep hormone. And caffeine coupled with adenine, the ATCG, the A of ATCG, and sugar produce melatonin. So if you have excess caffeine mixed with adenine and sugar, you have excess melatonin, so the pineal gland would shrink. And that would explain why. Schizophrenics have a small pineal gland. So why does dehydration cause schizophrenia? For sure, at this point we don't know, but I hypothesize that the hydroxide ion on the adenine is stripped off that molecule, leading to genetic abnormalities which are passed down through the generations. Schizophrenia is a genetic disease, at least it can be. However, it may also be induced by drinking an energy drink such as Red Bull. There are 7.5 billion cans of Red Bull that are purchased every year, and they're high in caffeine. They came out at the same time as the increase in schizophrenia rates among young men. Now, the children of the 1960s, when LSD was the drug of choice, have offspring beginning in 1987. However, it is the young males that have the 28% increase, whereas females only have a 3% increase since 1989. This points to Red Bull energy drink theory being a stronger argument than LSD. In my particular case, my paternal grandmother had cholera, which she contracted during the birth of her first child. She subsequently had 9 more children, one of which my father, and 2 of those 9 children were schizoids. To conclude, the cause of schizophrenia is dehydration, which causes damages to the adenine molecule. This leads to a genetic defect that follows for generations. 1% of the world's population suffer from schizophrenia. The illness has a devastating effect on the patient's life as well as his or her family. Hospitalization of patients with schizophrenia run into the billions of dollars, as it requires more hospitalization than any other disease. That's it. So here's a brief overview of the causes of schizophrenia, cholera, and caffeine. The slide shows the different mental illnesses that are caused by dehydration. Notice in the second column, third one down, is caffeine. Below that is hydrogen peroxide, and below that, at the bottom in that column, is ferric chloride, and they all lead to schizophrenia. And then we have another slide, high iron and high sodium chloride, or salt, leads to schizophrenia. So the salt comes from a marine environment, salt in the air, And the next slide is showing caffeine and adenine plus sugar and 6 parts water leading to melatonin, which shrinks the pineal gland. Caffeine and acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter, lead to high glutamic acid, which leads to ALS, another disease. Melatonin and caffeine damage the adenine, which leads to genetic schizophrenia. And finally, we have melatonin leads to small pineal gland, which is the sign of schizophrenia. Patients with schizophrenia have high dopamine, whereas those with Parkinson's have low dopamine. Melatonin and caffeine damage the adenine, which leads to genetic schizophrenia. High iron and high sodium chloride lead to schizophrenia. And acetylcholine and hydrogen peroxide lead to schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease. There's a connection between Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and schizophrenia. All mental illness seems to be caused by dehydration. And that's it. I conclude my talk. My name is Paul Cusack. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation.